Hello, today we are going to make paint tube beads from polymer clay beads and earrings, which make lovely presents for friends who are artistically inclined. I will show you now a list of the equipment you will need. To start, you'll need a block of polymer clay. This is Primo, which is the one I prefer. It's 2 ounce. This is a regular size you will buy in your craft shop. You need to condition your clay, so you need to roll it into a ball. Conditioning is merely moving the polymer around inside the clay, just to distribute it evenly. It's been sitting on a shelf for a while. So then you end up with a ball. And then after you've got your ball, you roll it and you end up with a log. I have made my log from the ball of kneaded clay. I now need to mark it off to cut it. I use about 1 1/4 inches. I'm using my tissue blade, and 1 1/4 inches translates roughly into 3.2 centimetres. But I think such exactitude is a little bit tiresome, so we're not really going to go there. So I'm going to cut these, and then I will work with 1. And just to remind you what we're actually trying to achieve, here is a paint tube bead already made, and I'm just going to leave it here so you can see it. So I'm going to cut a third off this log, and the third will be the neck of the tube and the cap. So put that to one side, and now I have the main part. Then about a third of it needs to be squished, because I want to make the rolled over bottom of the tube. So you squish it very gently, and you just push, push, push. Make sure it doesn't fan out too much, otherwise it'll just be a bit of a mess down here. So lovely, it's squished, you can see it's squished. I'm now going to very gently roll it over and tuck it in, because I want this lovely curl to be visible at the ends. And because it's cartoonish paint tube, let's make it look as if it's been used. So we're going to very gently distort it. So we've still got our nice little curls. Then I'm going to use a clay tool available from your craft shop, and I'm going to make grooves in the bottom. And you can see I have done grooves in the bottom of this. So I need to make 3 grooves. 3 seems to be the magic number. Make sure that the grooves continue through to the next side, and then I'm just going to make a little indentation, and when you paint later you'll be grateful that you have actually done this. So now to the top end of the paint tube. So I need to squish the ends slightly and hold it firmly, and then I'm going to use the, oops, I've got a little piece of fibre there. So this is the lolly stick or sucker stick. Just put it into the hole. This is going to take the neck of the paint tube. It needs to be fairly sizable. You can see it, fairly sizable hole. Now put that down, then get your little top that you have created, and you are going to cut almost half. Cut it in half. Put one bit aside. That's going to be the top. This is going to be the neck of the paint tube. So roll it around, roll it out, and then it doesn't have to be terribly long, and then you need to pinch the end. So imagine, you don't want it to be quite like a carrot, but you do need it to be narrower. So then you're going to now place it into this hole. So now we've got, that's how it looks now. And of course you want to make sure that it doesn't come out, so you'll very gently going to squish it inwards, not too much, but when it bakes it will actually fuse, so that's lovely. So you've got the neck of your paint tube. Now you need to make the lid. Okay, roll it around into lovely. Now this is where have a look at the top of your ballpoint pens, and you often will find a lovely pattern, and you can use it to be the pattern that's in the top of your paint tube. So give it a good squish, gently lift it up, turn it over, and you are going to score just a little area, just big enough where it's going to come into contact with the top of the neck, and this will just help it to stick during the baking process. Now you're going to push it together gently, so you've got it pushed together gently, and now it almost looks like a paint tube. Some refinements are needed. You're going to use your clay modelling tool again, and you're going to make quite chunky grooves in the side of the lid, and you can see I have done that with this one. So this is how you do it, and they don't have to be finely done. This is a cartoonish bead, so there we are. That looks pretty good. I think that looks fine. Now I want to make the indentation in a rectangle to be my label. So again, I'm using the clay tool, and I'm just indenting, and this will actually be helpful. This is going to be the label of your paint tube, but if you don't do this, it's difficult to have the demarcation between your paint colour and your white label. So do the same on the other side. Don't make it too small, otherwise you will regret it when it comes to painting. You'll think, why on earth did I do something so small? So this is now made, and this is now going to become a bead. So I need to make a hole in this. So I'm going to put a hole at sort of the top third. So I have my clay tools here, my clay hole making, which are merely darning needles that I have made handles for using polymer clay. So I'm looking at about the top third, and then this is eyeballing it. If it comes out a bit wrong, you can just take it out and redo it, and just push the clay back over the hole that you made by mistake. This is a very forgiving medium. So that's the first one. This is the second one, which is slightly bigger. You don't want to try and bore something that's too big in first off, otherwise you might distort the clay. And this is the final, this is the biggest needle that I have. And to make sure that it is actually going to be big enough for the thread you want to use, I have actually cut some waxed cotton thread. This is the one I use, and just make sure that it goes into the hole before you actually bake it. You can, if you have forgotten to make the hole, you can actually drill this when it's baked, but why go to all that trouble if you don't have to? So remember, make the hole. So here's another one I made earlier, exactly the same, but I want to turn this into an earring. So put the tools away. I will need a wire, and you buy it as findings, you buy it in a craft shop. It's got a loop in the top because it will fit into an earring. So that is actually a bit long, as we can see, so we will measure it, and with wire cutters I'm going to, not right down to the bottom, I want the wire inside to end about there. This is, as I say, this is an inexact science. Cut it on the oblique, Just makes a nice little point that you can put in. And then from the top you need to eyeball this going down. So I will have to find a place in the middle of the lid and then very gently try to push it down. Sometimes when you're doing this, the wire will poke out of the side and you'll think, oh no, that's ruined. It is not ruined. You just take it out, smooth over the little defect and try again. But you do, if you can, get it done first time round, and then just turn the bead round so you can actually get an idea that you are going more or less in the right direction. So we're pushing it in. It hasn't poked out anywhere, so, and I like to leave quite a long stalk. You might want to have a much shorter stalk. I just find it dangles more pleasingly if you've got a little bit of a stalk on it. So that's the bead made. This is the earring, and so that now we need to bake these. So bring in the baking tray that has polyfill fibre in it. You buy it from your craft shop, pop it in here, put that over there, put a lid on it. This is very important. If you don't have this sort of baking tray, use a covered casserole, or failing that, a shallow roasting tray, and put some heavy duty aluminium foil on the top. The reason you need to have it covered is you do not want the plasticizer residue coating the inside of your domestic oven. This will go into the oven at 275 Fahrenheit or 130 centigrade for 15 to 20 to 25 minutes, depending upon the size of your bead. These are now baked. So the next stage is to wipe them with a thinner rag, and the reason you need to do this is that you need to remove any trace of the plasticizer on the surface of the bead. Otherwise the paint will not dry. I have done this myself, the first couple of batches, and none of them dried, and it was a bit miserable, so don't do that. Use a thinner rag. You don't really want to breathe this in any longer than you have to, so I've actually got the window wide open, and then you just want to have a really good rub, and it dries almost instantly. So we need to make sure though that it is thoroughly wiped. Put the lid on our jar, wipe my hands. Now we're ready to continue. So the next stage is we've wiped them. Now we're going to paint them. Now painting them with a white, this is a white acrylic, and the reason we paint them is it gives a really nice surface for the remainder of your paint job, because this is going to be whatever colour, this will remain white, but there's also little flecks of fluff. As anybody who's ever worked with white clay will know, fluff appears from nowhere. It's quite odd. So we've got little grains of fluff. You may not be able to see it, but you'll certainly see it close up when you come to write your label. So you're going to paint your tube white. So let's have a little. Don't need to put too much on. It dries very, very quickly. So I'm just going to paint. And then you want to let it dry without getting it touching anything. So put a stick in. This is a cocktail, not a cocktail, so a barbecue stick. Where you've handled it, obviously paint that again, and then paint the top, or the bottom rather, and the twiddly bits at the side, and then you are going to put it in a piece of Oasis, and as you will see here was some I did earlier, so this is going to go in here to dry. Now the fun bit starts. I use an acrylic colour, so it's water based, and you don't need very much, so I tend to use the lid as my palette. So going to very carefully put the first layer on, and you'll be grateful now that you made your little grooves for your label, because it won't cover where your label is going to be. So this is actually a lovely part of the process. Some colours, especially yellows, you might actually need to do a couple of coats, because yellow is a little bit insipid until you've got a couple of coats on. So, oops, we've got a little bit on there, never mind. And we're going to carry on until it's all done. Now need to do the black top of the paint tube. So I'm using acrylic paint. Don't need to have very much on it. Just paint the top. Start by painting the top. And then when you come to the outside, the edges, just drag your brush. Drag your brush around. Don't paint into the grooves that you made, because this is where the fact that you painted the whole thing white will pay off, because you can see these lovely demarcated grooves. Now for the silver neck and the bottom of the paint tube. I use this imitation silver. The brand is Goldfinger. Unfortunately, it's an oil based, and I haven't found an acrylic based silver paint. You may be able to. So I use a very small, and you can see a very narrow based square brush. I only use this for oil based paint. So you need a little bit of thinner, which stinks, which is why the window is open, and I use the end of the tube as my palette, because you need so little. So I'm going to hold the tube like this, and I'm going to actually try to twirl the tube around so that I'm not dabbing at it. So you have to be bold. So I'm going to start here and then twirl it around. And if it goes on the black, it doesn't really matter. As I said before, this is more of a cartoon bead than a one that's supposed to look absolutely authentic. Turn it around, do your little curly bits at the end first, make sure you don't forget those. So stick a little bit of the silver in there, and then very gently and carefully brush the silver, and here you can go in the grooves. So, and this will take a little while to dry because it is oil based. So again, this can go back on your oasis for maybe an hour. So that's that stage done. Now for the lettering, I'm using a fine point Sharpie, which is a fibre pen, and start your letter from the top down. So I'm going to do blue. You might want to be fancy and do marine, and I have done that. And so I often vary my font. So I might use capitals and then put in a little lowercase. It just makes it look quite arty, I think. The lettering is now done, and we need to put 3 coats of varathane glaze on the bead. Here are some beads I made earlier, and as you can see, because they're quite chunky beads, you need to have fairly chunky spacer beads between them. So, spacer beads, we will quickly demonstrate what spacer beads look like. So I tend to make quite a lot, and then I've got a jar full of them, so when I come to make a necklace I've got a nice selection already made. So how do we make a spacer bead? We take some Primo again. I've rolled this into a log. We always go for the log first, and we'll just start with that. We don't need too much. So this is demonstration only. Give it a little knead so you get a nice ball. Start off with your smallest hole maker go through the other side. And then you can go to your medium hole maker, turn it round, and then the biggest one, because remember we want the thread that we first used to go through these beads as well as the paint tubes. So this is your spacer bead. You will thread it onto a wire. I use 14 gauge wire. You can buy it from any hardware store. Thread it onto your wire. So you can make quite a few, and then you bake it in exactly the same way as you baked your paint tubes. So enjoy your beads. And if you want to know more about the magic of polymer clay, this is the book I use. It's called Making Polymer Clay Beads by Carol Black.